My name is Ben Gerst. I am Director of Platform Technologies here at the New York Times. I live in New York, New York. I'm originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I have 328 friends. I have 300-some business connections that link me to over 5 million people. I have some photos of my wife and kids, if you guys want to see them. I was born on June 20th, don't make me tell you the year. We can share a few articles that I read today and some music that I listened to. You guys could hear that. So broadcasting information over social networks has become the norm over the past few years, whether it's your personal or business info, pictures, your wife and kids, videos, charities, politics, or what and where you had breakfast. It all adds up to a whole lot of data and a quickly changing landscape in today's web. I lead the dev teams at the New York Times who work on social media and community. And the amount of data we gather for social software has been growing over the past couple of years at a remarkable rate. And as we try to get rid of the bottlenecks so we can get more data and scale our systems to handle it, it's important to take a look around and see what other folks are doing and see what other companies are doing. And that was kind of the idea behind this event here today. So I'm just going to kick things off here. We'll get started with our first speaker. He's Andy Mitchell. Andy has a long history with media companies after working with both CNN and the Daily Beast. Now he is the manager of strategic partner development at Facebook here in New York. Basically, that means he gets to hear from me a lot.
Thanks, Ben. I don't know if it would be a gets to or has to, but we'll try to gets to hear from you. Thanks for having Facebook here to talk about the Open Graph. We had so first of all, I know this is a relatively technical crowd, and I'm not a technical guy, so you can stump me if you try. So please don't. We are going to have a little bit of Q&A at the end. At F8, we made some announcements around the Open Graph. So I'm just going to kind of give you guys a background of a little bit of history of the Facebook platform, and then also where we see it going in the next couple months, few months. So if you look back at the Facebook platform, really the evolution started in 2006 when we evolved from being a destination into a platform. It was followed quickly by Facebook Connect, the rise of social games, which I'm sure all of you loved and built your farms. April 2010 was the launch of the like button, which really started to amp up distribution and referrals to all of our media partners. So just one thing, a little bit of background, I think a lot of you guys are in the media world, and the partnership work that I'm a part of, first and foremost, what we are charged with doing is sending referrals from Facebook to our media partners. So really my success is my partner's success, so we work very hard to try to figure out how to leverage the platform in the most effective way we can to drive you referrals. So really what we're starting to recognize is the web is reorganizing around people. So when the internet first started, we were reminiscing earlier about our CNN days with one of the other speakers. I wrote the press release for the launch of CNN.com in 1995 when I started in PR. And there was a finite amount of sites, and it was really easy to find what you were looking for. And then once there was a proliferation of destinations on the web, really targeted search. You go to Google, you type in what you're looking for, and you end up there. What we're starting to see now, what we really think is the future, is your friends are really going to point you to what is important to you and what's really happening within your social graph, because chances are really good if your friends are interested in it, whether it be a newspaper article or music, it's very likely you're going to be interested in it as well. And there's a couple of things that have really pointed us in that direction and made it really clear to us. The first is Facebook Photos. So we launched a photo sharing product. We were very late on the market. Flickr was by far the #1 site. there were sites that you could make books, and you could red eye reduction. I mean, basically every product feature in the world. We launched a pretty minimal product, right? Basically, you could upload your photos. But we learned one thing, and it really sent a very strong signal. And that is, if you can tag your photos, you can share them with your friends, that's really the feature, no matter what other product features that you offer, that people gravitate to. So Facebook Photos went from 0 to now, by all of our estimations, we're the biggest photo sharing site on the internet, actually larger than all the other photo sharing sites combined. And again, with no real product features except you can share with your friends. Social games, I joked about Farmville, but all joking aside, is they created, there's nobody that is going to make the argument that these are anything other than like a 1984 Apple II computer graphically generated game. I mean, there's nothing cool about it, there's nothing exciting, except for, again, one thing. You can create, in this case, a city with your friends, you build buildings next to them in Farmville, you buy your friends a tractor, and ultimately, again, there are hundreds of millions of people that play these games, and Zynga has a pretty crazy valuation in the second market. So again, very simple games, but because you can play with your friends, ultimately proved the most valuable to the marketplace. So at F8, we, again, as we tend to do, turn the platform on its head and pretty much relaunched it. It started out with some iterating on our social channels. So the social channel that is really at the heart of what we announced at F8 is the timeline. So the profile today, and it was funny, I was in somebody's office today, and because we've had this and we've been beta testing it for a while, I forgot what the profile looked like. But it's as basic as it could possibly be, right? It's got, we like to think of it as, it's about the first 30 seconds of the conversation. What your name is, where you went to school, the relationship status, that's about it. When timeline launches, and I'm sure as a room of developers that most, if not all of you already have it. When timeline launches, it really allows you to tell the story of your life. So from what you were doing, at that moment, all the way through, all your activities, all the way back to, you can even add things back, including your birth. And that's actually my head of hair. So it's been downhill since birth. So we did a quick video just to kind of give you guys a sense of what Timeline offers and what it can be once you kind of go back in and start to fill out your history. So I know the first question is going to be, when does Timeline launch? I wish I knew. So we are really working as hard as we can to get it right and to make it great from the start. People are really excited about it, and typically we launch products that are mostly done and 98% done, but we really want to make sure the Timeline is great before we push it out to the world. So I think the heart of what we announced at F8 is the Open Graph, which is one API that facilitates distribution across our platform. So we've been evolving the look of your homepage over the last couple of weeks. The first thing that we introduced was a revised newsfeed. So one of the things that our product team was challenged with is trying to figure out, in this world of the Open Graph, what we're going to get to, is there's going to be so much data and information shared in Facebook that how do you separate the signal from the noise? So the product team is working very, very hard to try and figure out, based on your relationship, so everybody's going to see, as they do today, a different homepage, but based on your relationship with different objects, whether it be friends or brands that you follow, everything within your social graph, we're going to try and guess and make an educated guess, but guess at what we think that you want to see. So there's going to be some things you're not going to see as much of within your newsfeed, or not as much, if that's even happening today. We launched that right before FA. So to complement newsfeed and to make up for that, we launched what we call the ticker. So what the ticker does is it gives you at any given moment exactly what your friends are doing at that given second. So you can see your friends are listening to a song, and we're going to get into more about how the graph works. Listening to a song, playing a game, reading an article. So far there's a finite number of actions that are shareable into timeline, and then that will become infinite. Third place where we are driving distribution is into timeline. So part of what the Open Graph shares is into your timeline. You'll be able to capture it for yourself, and then also for your friends to see the different actions that you've taken with each particular application. So whether it be on Facebook Canvas or on a domain, that is considered in our world an application because an application is installed on the site. And so each site will have a profile box for each application, so you'll share your activity into that. So let me just give you guys a quick video demo of how the Open Graph works, and then we'll get into more of the meat of it. What the value is of building on it, how to build on it, and really what the Open Graph is. So at FA, again, we announced distribution, adding a timeline, creates distribution across 3 places, ticker, newsfeed, and timeline. So when you think about what we announced at F8 in 2010, the like button, that's what we referred to as the launch of the Open Graph. But the fact is it really wasn't that open because there was one action that you could participate in, and that was like. So what we've done with making the graph truly open is really any verb can become an action and associated with an object. So to talk about recipes, a user, the action in this case would be cooking, and the object would be a recipe. So really, like I said, the graph is completely open, and any developer can define an action associated with a particular object. So actions are, again, they're verbs, they're activities people can take in your app. So watching, listening, adding, and the objects are what's associated with that application. So watching a movie, listening to a song, or adding a photo. The first thing you need to do to get people to share their activity into the Open Graph is to get them to authenticate. So this is our current authentication dialog. Really, it is not the most user-friendly, and that was actually on strategy at the time because we wanted to make sure people understood exactly what they were authorizing. Didn't allow the amount of customization that we think and we heard from our developers that you wanted. So what we've done is evolved into a new authentication dialog. So first of all, you can add your logo at the top, so you can tell people exactly what you're asking them to authorize. It's got default activity permissions, and then the additional permissions that you're asking for specific to your app. Also, it's got a timeline preview. So this, you will show people exactly what you are asking them to publish into their timeline, and what activities exactly you're asking them to share with their friends. So what we're trying to do is help people understand and give them complete control over their experience, and also just make sure that they understand exactly what they're opting into, so that they will understand that if they're reading a particular article, their friends will see that, listening to a song. Also, all the developers have the ability to add whatever controls on their site. So we'll get into a few examples in a minute about those kind of different controls that you can offer. So really what the goal is, and what we think is that the real value to our developers, is an authenticated referral. So once somebody is authorized sharing their activity into from your application onto their timeline, they become an authenticated referral. And so this is the kind of data that we've seen in the early month or so of the launch of the Open Graph. So because you're able to customize the experience, 20% more page views, people feel welcome when they get to the site, the bounce rates are lower, the time spent is pretty amazing because they see what their friends are doing, so it gives them more things to be interested in their site. And with that 100% of your referral traffic being connected, it really creates the opportunity to develop a deeply social site. We've also evolved our analytics dashboards. So first of all, you'll see exactly how many people are authoring your app. So one thing you can do, we've seen some developers have some great success in getting more people through that authorization process, is asking for different permissions to test out what is turning people off. So then, just like you would always do with A/B testing on your sites, but we're seeing a real difference on each site based on what permissions they're asking for, what percentage of people authorize the app to share their activity. The other thing which has been really interesting to watch from our early launch partners is where people are connecting with that activity. So whether it's a ticker, whether it's a news feed, and because timeline is so limited, we haven't seen a lot of that. We're really excited when that rolls out more broadly. We think there's going to be a lot of activity that is going to be clicked on from within timelines. But right now it's been interesting to watch news feed versus the ticker. So really what our goal is to create this virtuous cycle of distribution. So as a developer, you send new users to your app, you push them through the authentication process, they publish their activity through the Open Graph, their friends see it, those are potential new users for your app, you authenticate them. So really we're really starting to see, it's pretty incredible, and I'll actually give you some examples here, the success that some of our early launch partners have seen, and we think that this is just the start, because it is such a limited rollout since F8, that once people understand what they're looking for and how to authenticate, once it's more broadly available, we expect that these numbers are going to continue to grow, and the Open Graph is going to become much more powerful for our partners. So these were our launch partners. What we did is we launched what we refer to as 3 global actions. So watch, listen, and read are global actions. So those would share a profile box. So whether it's from the New York Times or from the Washington Post or from CNN.com or even a blog, those would be shared into one activity box because those global actions we think are going to get the most activity, and so they'll be placed higher in the profile because everything is based on recency in timeline. And then custom actions, again, there's an infinite amount. I heard the other day that we've had about 100,000 custom actions already submitted. So it'll be our developer relations team is actually approving custom actions at the start because we want to make sure that students have a good experience. Yep. So that's a great question. I have not counted the dictionary.
There's somebody editing that?
Excuse me?
Is there a team editing that?
So our developer relations team is approving all actions and objects. So there are easily 100,000 actions and objects. Right? So probably not 100,000 verbs, but also we don't know what they are because obviously we haven't gone in and looked at them. But we want people to have a great experience. So I think the graph will truly be open and will allow people to ask people to authenticate for any action and object on their site. But at the start, we just want to make sure they make sense to people and that people have a good experience at the start. So one of our early launch partners is the Washington Post. So as a developer, the big question to ask yourself at the very beginning is, do you want to implement the Open Graph on your domain, or do you want to create a campus experience within Facebook that's some version of your site, some social version of your site? So my examples are both. So the Washington Post created what they call the Washington Post Social Reader within Facebook. So they decided to take to build a campus app and create a distinctly social experience that is a complement to their domain. So you can see, and one of the things, because it's an API, it's not a plugin, like we launched in 2010, so it's up to every site to create whatever experience they think is going to be best for their users. We see, again, in our launch partners, kind of across the board on experiences that have been built. So what the Washington Post has done, the first thing you see is friends that also have authorized the Washington Post Social Reader. You see what your friends are reading, both by number, but then also by recency. So you can see recent stories first. And then they've also done, which I think is actually a really great for discovery, they've also done it by topic, so you can see what your friends are reading about. Not surprisingly, my friends are reading about Mark Zuckerberg, because I have a lot of friends that think about. So The Guardian in the UK is also another site that decided to take a campus experience. They launched what they call The Guardian on Facebook. Theirs is not, at least their main page, is not quite as social as the Washington Post. They have this version, I think it's actually a really interesting approach, and it's proven valuable for them. It's basically a version of Newsfeed. They call it the activity stream on their homepage, so you can see what your friends are reading. 1 month in, so it was a few weeks ago, but within 4 weeks, they got more than 1 million installs of an application on Facebook. So we think this is a really great early success story. And they continued actually to grow because of that virtual circle. They continue to grow since that first point. Yahoo News took a very different approach. So what they did is they implemented the Open Graph on their main domain, on news.yahoo.com. So I actually really like the Yahoo experience for a few things. So first of all, once you've authorized the application, you see all your friends that have also authorized the app. So it feels comfortable to you when you first get there. You see your friends there. Coming from a news organization, I'm sure that this was I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall in these meetings. Because the default tab that they give you is your friends. So basically, what the Yahoo News editors have decided is that what your friends are reading is more interesting to you than what traditionally would be chosen by the editor. So that's a pretty bold statement on what they think the value of friends are. And then on the upper right-hand corner, that's actually where they push you to authorize the application. But then they give you full control over there to tell people that there are certain stories you don't want to share, and each story also has a control so you don't have to share it. They actually prompt you to say, no, I don't want to share this story. So we got data from Yahoo News shared with us, so they've had more than 2 million people authorize the app. I think it's great. Their referrals are more than double. I think the most interesting thing and the most exciting thing from my perspective, and being a big proponent of news, is that younger users, which are new for Yahoo, are the ones that have authorized the app and are using it. So I think that's really exciting to try and get new consumers into the news. The other example is not in news. It's in music. I think it's actually, but I like what they've done a lot because not only have they used the Open Graph, but they've also used the Graph API, so that as soon as I log in with Facebook, they're going to show me music that I like based on what's in my profile, and they're also going to show me what my friends are listening to. So they're reading my friends' profiles as well as mine to give me a personalized experience, as well as sharing my activity after I've authorized the app. And their traffic is up more than 4x since they launched. So, and their CEO called the Open Graph the best distribution platform we've ever had. So that was awesome to excerpt. And again, really exciting that our developers are seeing success in the Open Graph. So I just have a couple minutes left, so I just wanted to kind of skip through because we just launched a new mobile platform, and really the bet we're making is that First of all, surprising to me that the mobile web is still as big as it is, with apps just taking off as much as they are. So we see on our application that still about half the people use m.facebook.com as opposed to accessing through our Android or our iPhone app. But what we try to do is create a scalable solution for mobile and also build a platform that's scalable for our partners. So we are making a big bet on HTML5 because we think that it is more sustainable for everybody. We want to build on one code base in multiple places, and we know for efficiency that everybody else is too. So we recently launched our new mobile platform. Our iPhone app and our iPad app are all based on HTML5 and have been quite successful for us so far. So I'll get into, I'm not going to, just for a lack of time, there's similar social channels in mobile as there are on desktop. So there's a newsfeed. There's not a ticker, but there is going to be a mobile timeline that looks really beautiful to share your activity in. So we think that this mobile platform is a real scalable solution for our partners. So out of time, but does anybody have any questions before, I don't know if that time you flashed was included Q&A or not? No? Okay. Off the hook.
All right. The verbs, if two developers have choose the same verb, what happens?
That's fine. There's going to be multiple developers that are going to have, I mean, there's going to be hundreds of developers that have some of the verbs. Okay. But so they would not become our plan right now is to only have those 3 custom actions. I'm sorry, 3 global actions. I'm sure that when we get a critical mass of a certain action, that we'll consider creating additional global actions. Well, thanks so much for including us.
Okay, next up we have Jason Ellis. Jason is a researcher in the social computing group at the IBM T.J. Watson Research Center. His current work focuses on using social computing technology to empower the next billion users, those in developing countries who do not yet benefit from computing technology. Welcome, Jason.
I'm Jason Ellis. I'm a member of the social computing group at IBM Research. And I guess I don't know how many of you know, but the IBM Research Lab, actually the worldwide headquarters of IBM Research, north of New York City in Yorktown Heights. So it's not far, and I actually live in the city. So there's work going on there that you might be aware of. For example, the Watson project that's done out of that. Today I'm going to tell you about social computing in the developing world, an area that my group has been working in for about 3 years now. And I'm going to start off by giving you a little bit of background on the team. So we are a multidisciplinary team that combines social science, computer science, and design. And the way we work is we take an iterative approach. We go out into the field, look at the challenges that people have, look at how they're currently using technology, and start thinking and brainstorming with them about ways that we can help. We then do a participatory or design process, iterating with the users. We'll bring in paper prototypes with ideas on them, get feedback from them, then build sort of small-scale prototypes that run, deploy those, get feedback, ultimately scaling up to solutions that have broader impact and can be deployed more widely, all along the way doing qualitative and quantitative assessment. We have about a 10-year history of doing work in this space. We've done work in social visualization, incentive structures, mobile applications, voice-based systems, virtual worlds. But today I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our developing nations. So, if you want interested in the other stuff, I'm happy to talk about that later. And there's also more information on our website. So what got us really excited about the developing nation space is the innovative use of mobile phones that we saw already happening on the ground. and really starting to think about those uses and start to learn from them and think about ways that IBM can help build on those uses. And I'm going to start off just by giving you a few examples of some of those things that we saw. So one example is a process called send. So mobile phone use in developing nations is quite different from that in the developed world in at least one key way, and that is that very few people have service money. Right? It's always pay as you go. Almost 95% of folks have pay as you go phones, and the way that works is you buy a card at your local phone stand. There's a place on the back, you scrape that off, and there's a number presented there. You take that number, you put it into your phone, and now you've loaded that amount of money onto your phone. And what folks have done is sort of build on this and learn how and develop a practice, a grassroots practice of taking money and sending it over long distances using this infrastructure, this existing technology. What they've done is they go to the store, they buy one of these cards, they scrape it off, and they make a phone call. They call a phone lady in a remote village. They tell her the number over the phone. She puts that number into her phone, loads it, and then gives that appropriate amount of money to the person in the village of their choice, minus a small commission. And so again, this is a grassroots process, and it's the beginning of the revolution of mobile money. It started based on need, it started based on technology that was already out there, and people being really inventive and ingenious, really, using that technology. But there were challenges with that as well, right? So, do you trust this person in a remote village that you may never have met to deliver the money to the person of your choice? Or perhaps the place where you're trying to send money, a city, a village, someplace that you've never been, you don't know a phone person, a phone lady in that city that you can connect with. And so what mobile phone companies have done is really seized on this, right? And said, we can help this scale, we can help it become more sustainable. And this is where mobile money really started to take into high gear. I'll show you some photos. M-Pesa is really the biggest mobile money provider in the world, and that's only in Kenya. But we've seen it elsewhere too. So these are some photos from some time I spent in rural Uganda. On the side of the road, we saw a photo, an ad for mobile money with two guys arguing. Hopefully mobile money will help them resolve their argument. Here's another photo of a guy who just got the check, and clearly he's a little shocked by the size of the bill. And his girlfriend remains blissfully unaware of this. Hopefully she'll stay that way, right? Because mobile money will come in and save them. So these are some examples of mobile money scaling up and becoming part of the culture, part of everyday life. And what we've been really excited to see is another sort of factor in what got us excited about developing nations is the radical scaling up of mobile adoption in those regions. So if you think about growth, developed countries are sort of peaking out on mobile phone adoption. In developing nations, it's just sort of going off the scale. More and more people are adopting them. The places that are the most voracious market are those in India and the African continent. And so these are places that IBM is really interested in looking forward in terms of growth for the company as well. And as researchers, we're getting in early and trying to help IBM. Another thing that I should mention here is that in many of these countries, folks have really leapfrogged, the countries themselves have leapfrogged wired infrastructure and gone entirely wireless out of the box. If they didn't have wired infrastructure when mobile kicked in, they probably will never have. And so it's just a sort of fascinating space and a fascinating place to think about, the implications of mobile technology and the way that, in a lot of ways, the developed countries can learn from development. So another example of mobile phones playing an interesting role and mobile technology playing an interesting role is a group called Pivot Access that I met in Rwanda during a trip there. Two of these guys, it's a small startup that started in about 2007. And two of these guys were educated in Rwanda, Gali Institute of Science and Technology. Two of them were educated in Europe, but they all sort of came together in Rwanda to do this startup. And the basic idea of the startup is to allow people to buy electricity using their mobile phone. So they've got their mobile phone, they've got a meter in their house that has a number on it. You can download a J2ME app to the phone and make a payment and buy electricity on the go when and where you need it and get it to your house instantaneously. In addition, on the right-hand side here, what you're seeing is a phone that has a printer attached. So not only can you purchase electricity with your mobile phone, you can actually print out a receipt for it as well. So they're making use of these phones that already exist and allowing people to take the next step, do new innovative things. And this points to a trend that we saw there, which is microtransactions. Right? You see micropayment, cell phones that are pay-as-you-go, microloans, and you probably heard of the Bean Foundation's microloan revolution, and then pay-as-you-go electricity is another step along that line. And the reason for this, a lot of the times, is the reason that this has been so explicitly adopted, this pay-as-you-go approach, is that folks don't always have consistent employment month to month. And so when they have employment, when they make money, they can purchase these services, and when they don't have to. So they have no sort of recurring expenses. They can buy these things when they need them. Another trend that we saw that was exciting and I think has really interesting implications for developing regions, particularly actually I'm talking now about Africa, is the radical uptake of internet. Right? And so currently in Africa, bandwidth is highly constrained, but over months and years, that's really changing. This photo that I'm showing here is one that I saw in the Johannesburg airport of CCOM. So when we arrived there in Johannesburg, everyone was talking about CCOM. This is undersea cable that was coming in. It was bringing new bandwidth onto the continent. And this was just sort of the first step on that road. In fact, more and more bandwidth is coming year over year. So CCOM was bringing 1,300 gigabits into Tanzania, Kenya, Mozambique, and South Africa, and that landed about 2008. 2011, another cable landed, the wax cable, bringing in for West Africa, 5,000 gigabits, and then in 2013, the South African Express, the big cable over here, is bringing in over almost 13,000. So you're seeing this radical scale of internet technology coming in. The question is, what new applications will be enabled by this? And what new capabilities will people bring to the table when the barrier to entry to internet access is radically low, prices come way down. So I think one of the trends that you're going to see is this increase of this changing perception of mobile phones. So a lot of folks in these regions are used to using mobile phones to connect with other people, call them on the phone and share information with them, talk to their family members, all the things that send text messages, doing the same thing. But there's this shift from holding the phone to your ear to holding it in your hand, right, where people are starting to use their phones to access back-end services and capabilities that are on computers that may be remote from them, and they're offered by those machines. And so mobile money is an early example of that, but there will be more. There will be more complex examples and more social examples. So one of the key examples, one of the key technologies that we see playing a role, mobile computing is obviously a key player here. Cell phones are the connected device of choice. We're not talking about laptops and desktops in the same way. Mobile phones everyone has them. So it's a way to reach out to them. Cloud computing, I think, is an important trend as well because many of these mobile phones are very low-end mobile phones. So enabling people to access services and new capabilities, you have to do that on a remote machine and allow it just as an access point to use their mobile phone. And then social computing. So connections between people are really important, resource-constrained environments, right? When you don't have resources and compute capabilities, you don't have the same sort of set of resources that we have here. You have to rely on others. An example is just carpool. Right? If you don't have a car, you have to rely on other people to get you in the market to sell goods. And I think social computing comes in. So I'm going to talk a little about just some of the projects that we have going on and that we've done in developing regions. I think at the top level, what our mission is really to create novel social computing applications and services that engage in a set of research issues because we are a research team. To, of course, align with IBM's goals because we're in IBM, but also to create social good. We want to validate that both qualitatively and quantitatively. We've done projects in India. We worked with our India Research Lab on a project called OpenWeb. I'll talk to you a little bit more about that. But basically, it's an end-user conference system using voice. In the USA, we've worked with analog populations. We're thinking there about groups that obviously aren't the same as those in developing nations. So those have similar qualities in some regard that we can learn from and then apply to development. In this case, we worked with homelessness in Atlanta. And then I'll talk a little about some of the work we've done in Africa with a couple NGOs, Climate Change and Love Life, and then also with a group called the Health Alliance, which is a group of 7 schools of public health in 60 East African countries. And they were really essential in terms of helping us do some initial field work on the ground. So that's where I'll start. Some of the work that we did with them was just attending their key sort of leadership meeting in Uganda, Tanzania, and Kenya. And there we spent time with the heads of these schools, understanding their curriculum, understanding how they're currently using technology and where they want to go, and also understanding the outreach that they're doing with the communities and how they want to facilitate the community using technology and help people learn safe public practices. And again, they also facilitated us taking trips into the field. So here we are pulling into a district hospital in Uganda, and we're doing interviews there, talking to the health professionals there, and seeing, actually saw live surgery in progress. Here we are in rural Rwanda, and we spent some time there just out in the fields, talking to farmers, understanding their day-to-day challenges, how they're using their mobiles, and what their work is like. Here we are actually doing some interviews in rural Uganda under a tree with some subsistence farmers, understanding their day-to-day habits. And I'm looking at the context of understanding that as well. Here's a close-up of that meeting with some of my colleagues on the left-hand side. And so it's been really essential for us to get there on the ground, obviously, to understand the context that we want to go into and the applications that we want to build, and also understand people's aspirations, where they want their technology, what sorts of tools and capabilities they'd be most interested in. It's also been essential in terms of building partnerships with folks, in terms of our university colleagues there. They served an essential role in terms of doing translation, but also helping us understand the cultural context of the world. So an example project that we did is one with a group called Text Change. They do something called incentive-based SMS quizzes, and they just have a few employees in Uganda, although they're scaling up and about to set out a little bit further into West Africa. And what they do is select a group of folks that they want to participate in the quiz. They send out messages to those participants in the form of quiz questions. So questions could be something like, you can get AIDS from a mosquito bite, yes or no. Those who get the answer wrong get the right answer and more information on the topic. Those who get the answer right get accolades and more information on the topic. And the way we incentivize all this is by every week the folks who have the most right answers in the quiz get entered into a pool for free cell phone. And as you know, cell phone minutes are a commodity, and it's a big deal for folks, so this is a real big incentive. And so all of this is subsidized by the mobile phone company. In this case, it was MTN, which is the biggest carrier in Africa. So we did a study with them. We first helped them organize their quiz questions, and then we designed the quiz from a study perspective. Then we identified 3,000 workers in 3 rural factories in Uganda and deployed the quiz to them over about 2 months. And there are a few outcomes from this. One was just learning outcomes. We looked at what people learned over time. Were they actually getting better at answering quiz questions? One of the interesting things that we saw is those groups that were more co-located had more correct answers on the quizzes. So it indicates that there may have been some social sharing of information, some discussion about the right answers, and that we can see that happening. We also looked at SMS as user interface. Right? So one of the challenges here is that most of the people who were involved in the quiz had never used their phone to access a backend system. So this system asked, to participate in the quiz and answer questions. The expectation was you'd answer in a particular format that was given to the user, but it's still a challenge, I think, for folks to adhere to, because they didn't have a notion of what is a backend system, what is a computer. So the format was basically a keyword and then an integer or another keyword to answer the question. We found, though, that a lot of folks answered with long sentences, like giving detailed explanation of their answer to the quiz question. Again, about 30% of folks would answer in a way that was correct, but was deemed incorrect by our backend system. In situations where they were distributed, in situations where they're co-located, it was radically lower, right? And so folks were learning from each other about how to appropriately answer the quiz. But I think what we want to do is create a situation where folks don't have to learn how to operate the system. The system understands the input from the user, right? And so going forward, we want to use potentially some natural language processing and other things so that when people do answer in a format that's not immediately identifiable by the system, we can respond to that and actually use the credit. So we publish these results in a conference called ACM Dev. It's actually a new conference for developing nations research. Looking forward, one of the things that we want to do is think about social incentives, right? So, right now what's being done is they're incentivizing participation through mobile money, but that's a monetary incentive, right? And that won't scale up to large groups because there's only so much money that's going to be going around there. So, thinking about can we do competitions between factories or different groups in a community and get them to want to have a higher participation level, a higher correct level, question level, to win out and get better prizes. Or can we do something like have badges, like some people see in Facebook or actually Foursquare or an Xbox Live, those types of badges that give you credence or authority in the community. So these types of sort of fun things, we'd like to compare that with monetary incentives and see that in politics more so than money. Here's a photo that we took in Uganda of one of the founders of Text to Change, a soccer jersey that they gave away as another one. So another project I want to talk about is with these analog populations I mentioned before, so populations in the US that we can learn some things from that we can then apply to developing nations. What we did was build a system called Community Resource Messenger. And that was deployed in Atlanta with Georgia Tech. The idea was to help homeless people better communicate with each other and also with their caseworkers. So what we did was, these homeless folks had basic cell phones, and we built for them a web-based service for the caseworkers. The idea is that the caseworkers could send and schedule outbound SMS messages to the homeless folks. And the homeless folks' messages would come into the system and be cataloged. So with voice and text messages coming into that system could be recorded. And this solved a very real problem for those caseworkers in that prior to the system, they had their mobile phone. All the interaction with their homeless population would happen through that. But when they went home and another caseworker came on duty, that person had none of that contact. It left the if there was a group of caseworkers working on a set of homeless folks, they didn't have the shared contacts to share this information, who said what to whom, so repeated messages. And so what we did, the system that we built allowed them to have a shared memory, basically. A shared place where all the caseworkers could see the individual interactions with different homeless folks and coalesce around that. In addition, we built an electronic message board for the homeless shelter. This is a place where homeless folks could text to and it would be shared with other folks in that center. They could also call in via voice and be transcoded to text and displayed on that board. And the homeless caseworkers, the caseworkers in that center also did that. So there were homeless folks and also the caseworkers approaching the facility and sharing information with each other. In addition, were postings called from a site called DoorDash.com where housing opportunities for homeless folks are posted. So they would see regularly information from the web which they may not have access to otherwise that they could then use to find shelter outside the homeless shelter. And so this is a shot of that board in the homeless shelter with one of the folks who live there operating it. And one of the things to point out here on this board is that each of these housing search listings there has a number next to it. And folks could text that number into the system and then receive back to their mobile phone more information on that housing listing and take that mobile with them out into the field as they explore the option. So the next thing I want to just give a bit of an overview of is a project that we did called TimesOpen. We did this work with our India Research Lab that was deployed into farming communities in rural India. And this is a question and answer service. Basically, you call, and it's designed for low literacy populations. Works on via voice on mobile phones. Folks call into the system and ask a question, and then other folks call in and hear that question and answer it. So there's these discussion threads that are available via voice by access. And one of the challenges with this type of system, though, is that everyone who called into the system would sort of hear the same thing over and over again. And sometimes that's useful if there's information about weather and things like that are broadly applicable. But sometimes you have a wheat farm and someone's telling you about how to plant corn. That's not interesting. Right? And so what we did was build a collaborative filtering system, basically, that allows folks, the system tracks the individual's movement through the content in the system, and then looks at that path and introduces them to other content in the system that would be of interest to them. So things that they haven't seen that are relevant. So it changes the system from everyone calling in and hearing the same content to individuals calling in and hearing content that's targeted towards them specifically. And one of the key things that we aimed at here was to not have the user have to do a whole lot in order to get this benefit. Right? So the way that we would do this on the web perhaps is to have someone click a star button or a like button to indicate interest in that. In this case, we just used the fact that people would skip to the next step, until they heard something they listened to all the way through. So that's a really key thing for folks who are new to information technology, I think, is that you make the overhead super, super low and just allow them to sort of get through things and try and infer as much from their behavior as you can, rather than asking them to interact. So it certainly would be nice if there was that. So another thing that we've been building on top of Spoken Web is build a system called IBM Picture Discussion. This is again targeting low literacy population, and the idea is to think about, okay, you have voice, now what other things could you add? We could add images, right? And so the idea here is the farmer goes out, he has a challenge with his field, plant turns in, and he takes a picture of that problem with his phone to share, right? You might take a photo and say the plant turns brown here and falls over and dies, and I don't know why. And that information is shared with the community online, and then answers start coming back. And along the right-hand side, you see those answers coming in. These bars indicate the length of the response, those that are adjacent to this image. So the image is the anchor for the voice-based conversation. One interesting observation about voice-based content, image-based content is that you can do a variety of different kinds of content. So you could have plants, animals, buildings, these sort of more concrete things, but you could also do more abstract things like maps or health diagrams. So we're exploring that. In addition, this platform runs on a variety of, this application runs on a variety of platforms. So on a low-end phone, if your phone has internet, you can receive images. If it has a camera, you can receive and send images. If you have a smartphone, like an Android phone, then you can use the entire application in a very rich way. And then we also have a web and kiosk. Each of these are driven by the same backend application. So, we built a bunch of sort of applications that were kind of one-off applications, targeting specific populations. Rural farmers with this picture talk application, or the texting application, or this homeless application to sort of help them collaborate more easily with each other. But there were some key, so a lot of infrastructure needed to deploy each of these. Hardware constraints, setting up the hardware, setting up the software, and getting hooked up to the telephony infrastructure, and then programming on top of it. This is relatively easy for folks at IBM who are expert in this, but for folks who are developers in developing nations or local entrepreneurs, it's a big challenge. And so our aim next was to sort of learning from these applications to build a platform that allows these applications to be much more easily developed and deployed, and also sold to folks in these markets. What we did was we took a look at some of the skills that are in those markets that developers have. PHP and Java were some of the key ones. PHP, of course, for the web, and Java for mobile phone programming. And we then built a set of abstractions in those languages to let folks get started really, really easily. So instead of having to set up the hardware and the software, all they have to do is just start programming. And actually here you see a one-line program that receives an SMS message and replies. And so we're aiming for folks to get started right out of the gate very quickly, but then to help them learn more as they like to. So providing an entry point and then motivation for folks to learn about additional and more complex tools like WebSphere and tools that IBM uses. In addition, to this sort of development infrastructure, we also got an application sort of inspired by the iPhone App Store, but targeting low-end phones and running in the cloud. There's no application downloaded to the phone in this case. It's all running remotely. These applications can combine SMS and voice, and there's these sort of two spaces: the App Store and the application development infrastructure. Looking a little bit more deeply at this App Store, there's a web interface for it that we've got out there, but of course most people we expect would be accessing it via voice or SMS, so there's interfaces through those modalities as well. And let's see, here are some of the initial sort of prototype apps that we built in our lab based on our experience in developing nations we're using internally. And these apps are on the store and accessible via mobile and within us. We're currently looking for partners to deploy this platform with and hope to do so in the coming years. So that's most of what I wanted to say. Just to conclude, the social computing group at IBM has about a 10-year history of research and development, but most recently we've become really, really interested in developing nation and what we like to call the next billion users of information technology. So what we're doing now is taking some early steps to help IBM understand this new context and the capabilities that people need on the ground and where IBM can do business. So thank you very much. Looks like I might have time for a few questions. Okay.
Large media organizations and small internet startups. She is currently the Vice President of Product and Technology at Figment, which is a online community devoted to reading and writing creation.
Hi, I know when you think of Facebook and IBM, the next thing you think of is Figment. So thanks for coming here today. I'd love to tell you a little bit about the Figment at first, but the majority of my talk tonight will be about how Figment sees the future of social media and what we're doing to play that space directly. We want to become ubiquitous. And in order to do that, and I would say that Facebook's ubiquitous, I know a lot of you feel that you need certain apps in your pocket at all times. And we want to be that for our users. Right now, our users are between the ages of 13 and 24, and they are passionate about writing fiction, and they're passionate about reading young adult fiction. So we want to become a necessary utility in their everyday life. This is Figment.com. So we are an online community for young adults who are avid readers and also avid writers. We debuted last December. Our birthday is December 6th. And we've grown to 80,000 gigs. And we have over 200,000 gig created books. So we have a very large database of books at this point in time. Our users are thoroughly addicted to pages. They're emotionally invested because the creative work is shared and thoughtfully reviewed by a huge audience. They can also make contacts with hundreds of verified, authorized, published authors, which means that their favorite authors are on Figment too, and their favorite authors are reading their work. Publishers love us because we're agnostic, and we've attracted the largest most avid group of teen readers on the web. We aren't affiliated with any one publishing house, and until now, this market has always been segmented. Anybody trying to reach teens who read online is usually a publishing house. Well, our non-affiliation means that we contract with everyone to promote their published titles in our feature section through our online content. The majority of our users are 13 to 24. However, we have a large amount of adult users too who are interested in writing young adult fiction, so they use our site to gain an audience. And I'm not sure how technical the audience is, but I'll just give a little shout out to it. I am the head of technology, so I can talk a little bit later if you guys are interested about that. But we are built on a Rails 24 app, and we've got a MySQL DB, and we use Redis for caching and REST background job. Our database is hugely important to us, as you can imagine. So is our site. So our figs, as they've affectionately named themselves, and I'll get into that in a little bit as well, love our partner contests. And our partners love the new audience it brings them. These are special pages that we produce for our publishers that we produce content And as you can see, one of them is promoting a title for a publishing house, and that is Steampunk Co. And the other is a partnership we have with 17 Magazine, which is still ongoing and it's a contest. This is another partnership we've had with MTV. And in many of our contests, we get celebrity online judges to judge the content of our users. And I want you to think about this for a moment. I don't know if you're avid readers in the audience or you were when you were a teenager, but I can't imagine how cool it would have been at 15 years old to have my favorite author or songwriter select my writing as a winner. We were able to do that for our DJ. And they also had an iPad in the process, which was too shabby to do that. And one more thing about us before I go into Ubiquity. We just launched groups for Figment, which is the usual kind of social media thing for a website. We allowed our users to create their own groups, but we took it a step further. And we thought about utility. We thought about utility for a whole other segment of our audience. So what we've done is we've identified educators in our database. So now we have librarians and teachers who are members of Figment.com, and they have a separate profile in Figment. We know who they are. We authenticate them manually, believe it or not. And teachers can create private groups, which serve as classrooms, online writing classrooms for their students. So now Figgies, or Figs, can produce writing in Figment.com, and they can share it with a small group of students or their class, and get feedback before they publish to the rest of the site. The teachers love this. This is our alpha. We'll be releasing a beta of this, and I'll talk more about that. This is who Figment is. We're all writing geeks. I'm a tech geek, but I'm also a writing geek. Everyone at Figment loves young adult fiction. I think our lawyer does too. He's the legal counsel there. I'm in technology, but I'm also in my second year of a master's in fine arts in young adult fiction. So I'm hugely dedicated to our user base, and I happen to love reading young adult fiction. So I'm to admit it. I hang out there and the bars and the whole aisle, and I'm not ashamed. And actually, we get the culture because we're part of it. Everybody at Figment is really excited about the releases of books, and we're just like our user base. We're just excited to there. And I hope I'm not insulting anybody, but every single person in this room is a geek too. And you might not be geeky about technology, or you might not be geeky about young adult fiction, but you're geeky about something. And whether it be technology, maybe movies, crafts, music, I'm pretty sure it's something. And in order to be a successful online community, you have to give geeks a place where they can fly their geek flags proudly. And we do that at Figment. And what I can say, how I can second that to you is I would say, there's probably a lot of programmers in the room. And if I ask you what your GitHub account is, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? But you know what? A lot of people don't know what it is. And I don't know if there are any knitters in the room, but if I ask for your Ravelry handle, you probably know it better than your middle name. And DJs and musicians, SoundCloud, right? Everybody's got this segmented community that they're a part of where they can fly their fruit flag. What we saw and what we realized is that there is a large but chaotic, disorganized web community out there. That's a niche begging for a centralized hub. So, it just so happens that we are used to that publishing and but we saw it as a huge chaotic community. It was segmented. There was no place you could go to get news on it, and also to publish your own work. So, Figment was born. Now, successful communities don't just provide the place to fly the free flag, but also provide the utility. And everyone, I don't care who you are, wants to treat their passion like their job. So you want the doodads, the planners, the tools to legitimize your session. So we give the hobbyists, the fans, whoever the audience is, you give them what they need to take their passion seriously, and you put it in their pocket. And that's where our goal is. Utility breeds ubiquity. You don't just give them a place to be themselves, but you also have to give them utility. We're still in the process at Figment of becoming a utility for those who love to read and write young adult fiction. We're working on several mobile initiatives and online tools that make it a necessary site for the writer. We see a lot of tools out there on the web that are either being done not so well or could be done better, or also need to be centralized. And for the writer, that is collaborative writing tools, character name generators, story and content submission trackers. All of this stuff is going to elevate the hobbyist writer to a professional level. Tools in their pockets to take their hobby seriously. Now, I mentioned before Ravelry.com. I'm also a knitter. I read young adult fiction. Now, if you've never heard of Ravelry.com, you may think, oh, a knitting website, like that's really niche-y. Well, Ravelry.com has been in existence for just a few years and has over 2 million users. They have completely revolutionized the industry of knitting patterns. And if you don't believe me, take a look. You cannot go into a knitting store without them knowing what Ravelry is. Most people who knit actually walk into a knitting store with printouts of their stash, which they keep on Ravelry.com. They are completely and utterly ubiquitous in the realm of knitting and crocheting. So utility is really important. And we see utility as important for the writer going down the road, and also for the educator. Now our social media. I think there's still a tendency, and feel free to argue with me, but there's still a tendency for people to apologize for their social network addiction. I've heard the term Twitter for. There are a lot of pejorative jokes about people who use social media. And I did a poll online among my Twitter followers before I came here, and I found almost everyone was ridiculed for their use of social media. Usually by others in their family or their social sphere. And if you've been ridiculed for your social media use, I'm not going to make you raise your hand, but I think you know what I mean. One of the things I find really funny about this, especially in terms of Twitter and Facebook, people are mocking a network that shapes political revolutions and disseminates news faster than any major outlet. And I know this because I worked in news, and I've seen Twitter trump my old news provider by minutes, and that's a lot in the news world. So this apology for social media, this is going to go away. It's going to completely go away. It's not going to extend itself into later generations. It doesn't extend itself into our user base at Figment.com. They have no shame that social media is a part of their everyday life. They were born with it. For them, they are the new breed. I also want to add that even in terms of fierce competition, sites like Foursquare, last year Foursquare grew 3,400%. So I don't think we need to apologize for being a social media company anymore. Has anyone read this article? It's a great article. Okay. We've all been hacked. And this actually feeds into a little bit about the Facebook discussion we were just having. Social media will also become more friendly as a marketing device. Maybe even a little bit too friendly. Right now, when I log into Facebook, which is a lot, I'm addicted to Facebook, I am confronted with several friends' constant use of Fitbit, which makes me feel like a slug. But it's made me look twice at the product. Every time, I see my friends using this product, I think, well, it must be good, she's using it every day, and he's using it, pretty regularly too. It's true that it's far better for your product to be sold to you by a friend. And this is going to continue. Jason Lorimer in the Huffington Post actually said, in the end, we are all influential, if only to a few, and marketers want you to be you out loud. You are a marketer, like it or not. Now get out there and start sharing, selling. So influence is really important. And this brings me to what I've been dying to talk about publicly for a really long time. And this is actually going to be the first time I am talking about this project publicly. Right now, ebooks are kind of revolutionizing publishing, and it's also revolutionizing the young adult fiction world as well. And, it's doing a lot of good, and ebooks have changed a lot in terms of delivery, but they're changing a lot about the economy of publishing too, and there's a lot of worry about that. A large portion of our next development efforts not only rely on utility, but also rely on making content more discoverable for our users and curating the young adult bookshelf. As bookstores like Borders are closing, it's really important for our users to be able to just stroll down the shelves, and Figment is going to provide that in the young adult space. One project we're working on is codenamed Immersion Fiction, and this uses advances in mobile technology notifications, which now can be pushed to every user based on location. So Android was the first to allow this, and now iOS is allowing it as well, and follows suit. So we're building a mobile app that will deliver location-based content from users' favorite authors. We'll begin serving our users with what I call the deleted scenes of the young adult fiction world. Why should DVD producers have all the fun? We get to use all those deleted scenes from books, the stuff that editors cut out, and we get to use them to promote titles and authors and bring foot traffic into brick-and-mortar stores. Because you'll be earning these extra scenes based upon where you travel. I can't reveal all of the immersion qualities here, but I'll tell you a little bit about it. You're going to be accessing extra material, and where you are accessing it will be key to the story. With the authors we have already lined up, we can offer exciting extras that feel as if they're happening just over your shoulder. I've written an entire thesis on how blurring the line between reality and fiction is what makes a book successful. And right now, with mobile technology, we can really blur that line. You know that your phone, obviously, can tell you that you're standing in the New York Times building. Now they're developing 8-axis sensors for phones and for mobile devices, which will also know where you're placed in two-dimensional space and three-dimensional space. So your phone will now know that you're on the 15th floor of the New York Times building using barometric pressure. I want you to think for a second about the level of immersion that you could have in a story being told to you mobily with that kind of data. So we believe the future of social media is smaller, it's niche, it's specialized, and it's going to offer users not just community, but utility. And we also see mobile technology continuing to shape the market, and communities will continue to use it not just as an added presence, but a way to make themselves necessary for utility. I do take a question, which I'm sure you may have some. It's actually, if you think about it this way, it's not necessarily necessarily where you are, like on the location of Fifth Avenue and 24th Street, but you're in a Barnes and Noble or you're in Starbucks. That's one of the ways that we're using it. We can also base it on where you are individually for certain authors. The content is driving the experience. We're not doing it the other way around. We actually think the most important piece of this is the fiction. So we're driving it based upon what the content is. It can be, depending upon the content being delivered. I mean, if you think about it this way, Foursquare knows that you're at a specific store, but it also knows where you are at the same time. You don't have to check in. You don't have to check in anymore. So now you can be walking by a location down the street, and if you subscribe to a certain author, and that's your favorite author, and there's content in there, your phone's going to prompt you to go get it by entering the store.
So I have a question for Nicole. I guess two questions. One is a yes, no, you can do real quickly. Are you going to do nonfiction? How are you monetizing your site?
No, we're not doing nonfiction at the time. We're dedicated to one particular community right now. Those partnership slides I told you, this is part 2, those are all paid. We have the largest group of really avid and rabid teen readers on the web, and it's really hard to reach that demographic, so publishers pay us to promote their new titles. And we do it, we do it obtrusively. Kids know that we're marketing to them, and they get it, and they like it. They want to know what's coming down the pike. So I make kids read.
Yeah, so I guess I have a question for Jason and Cameron. Jason, do you think orbital content applies in developing nations? And Cameron, are there things that Jason's doing that maybe apply to what you're doing?
Interesting. I'm actually curious about orbital content. I want to talk to you about that later. I think it applies to developing nations. More and more content producers come online in these regions. They're going to want ways to share their content. They're going to want people to be able to take that and repurpose it or keep it. And they're going to want attribution, right? They're going to want people to know who created that content. So I think these are sort of universal concerns that apply to us anyway.
Yeah, I was just embarrassed that I wasn't thinking about the next billion internet users, and so I wrote down in my notebook that we need to talk about this afterwards. So I don't know the answer, but hopefully tomorrow.
This is a question for Cameron. You mentioned, and I apologize, this is sort of a weedy technical question, but it's a technical crowd. So you mentioned that you're looking for schema.org markup on the sites that get dropped into the bar. What kind of uptake have you seen? Do, and I'm curious how much of it's out there.
Yeah, actually, we're not looking for too much stuff yet. We just decided that that's what we were going to output ours as. So if you share something on Twitter, we use that, and we're going to look for sort of any kind of micro-formatting. There's really, we would just that button, like I said, it's green and it turns pink. If we know what's going on the site, we would just like any site you're on, it would be pink, and we would know probably what you'd like to do. So I don't like right now. There's not a lot, but we're just going to do it all.
Like the app you were showing for the developing nations, it's a local language challenge for you to work with?
Oh, for the spoken web, the question and answer?
Yeah.
It's actually, there's no language understanding in that system, so it's all just sharing in the local language already. So there is a challenge in that only people who understand the same language can communicate with one another. But so that's the issue. For example, if you had, you couldn't do something like farmers in India, it's communicating with farmers in Swaziland, say, right? Which is something that might be interesting, particularly if there's a certain expertise in one of these countries that you'd like to have shared. But you need language translation for that. And what we're doing with that project is just focusing on helping people share within their language groups.
What about the written language? What about the written language?
Well,
the translation, or is it all linked?
well, let's see. Are you asking about a particular project or just sort of generally? I mean, Well, yeah, so, right. Well, you could do some language translation that way. We actually haven't explored that, but there's certainly possibilities there. The groups that we've worked with typically have, spoken English, because that's sort of the most easy way for us to get into this market. But you could imagine, doing, SMS sharing, transcoding it to another language, and actually sharing cross-language boundaries using text. It does require literacy. But actually, one of the things that's been interesting to find is that in Africa, actually, the fact that texting is cheaper than using voice on mobile phones has driven literacy. So you see people who are, kids who learned to text and learn to write, sharing with each other and sharing with their friends, and the older folks will see that who can't write. And they'll be like, well, I can save so much money by not using voice and learning how to text. Maybe I'll learn how to use a few simple phrases and save some money.
And are they typically doing that in English?
It depends on the language, yeah. I mean, a lot of these mobile phones, use Roman characters. So if your language doesn't use Roman characters, you're kind of in trouble. But yeah, I mean, there are many languages that do that in Africa.
Hi, my question is for Cameron. Have you given any thought to tracking the influence that the online content has to offline actions, or maybe from just things that are screenshot or dragged to the gimme bar, their influence on point of purchase at all? Or is that something that you guys aren't looking at yet?
No, we'd probably like to know more about that. I mean, it's kind of a big project, unfortunately, so there's a bunch of different things. That's obviously a great way to make money down the line. Right now, we're just trying to focus on, in terms of that influence, keeping track of attribution of sort of who created the content, but also the chain of how it got passed around. So try to understand that, like, a tastemaker is in some ways a content creator as well. I share space with this woman, runs a blog called Swissness, and she has a really important role, I think, in a lot of the design ecosystem in that way. So she didn't create the content, but she kind of made it in some ways.
Thanks.
Hey, I had a question. Oh, sorry, Jason, I had a question for you. What do you see as the some of the limiting parts of the infrastructure in developing worlds and interacting with people? Like, what's keeping them from doing what they want to do? Is it like a data throughput problem? Is it a power problem to have devices on as much as they need to? Is it just a lack of an application layer? Or
it's all that stuff. I mean, you're seeing the full challenge. I mean, in some places, there's just, you get power 5 hours out of the day, or it's unreliable, those sorts of things. And if you don't have the UPS, you're kind of SOL. People develop innovative solutions to this, right? So they'll charge their phones in the car, cigarette lighter. They know the guy with the car, and so everyone charges it that way.
Because it seems like a lot of times the big problem you're out trying to solve is not trying to make like the data networks faster or something. Like there's sort of some already threshold that's there, and there's other problems you're trying to solve.
There's definitely tons of issues. I mean, there's the electricity challenge. There's there's the data throughput challenge. So getting network infrastructure set up and things like that. I mean, one of the things that's been interesting though is this sort of this reversal, right? So. I mentioned this NGO that we're working with Text to Change, and they had a wired internet connection for months and months, and it was like totally unreliable. Like, what is this crap? We're getting terrible throughput, paying all this money. And they switched to wireless, using a GSM modem, and they got way better throughput through that. So it's a total flip of thinking from what we're used to here. I think one of the things we're going through an IBM and other cloud folks who move into the space, it's just how do you make things work in this space? It's a different way than you're doing it here, but it may be a way that is leading the way for a lot of folks, right? So we're trying to move into this wireless world where we have all this wired infrastructure that we're sort of relying on, legacy infrastructure. They don't have that. And so it's just a different approach. But, there's a lot of challenges in getting applications out there. I mean, some of it is also just in terms of understanding. So I mentioned some of these challenges, like people figuring out what it is to communicate with a computer versus talking to a person, right? So it's a sort of social challenge.
But do you think there's any misguided focus that exists now, or are there mostly just lots of problems? Are the things we should stop? Are the things we should stop focusing on? What think about other things?
Yeah, I don't want to go. I don't want to say too much. I don't want to go around slamming people. So we can talk a little about that afterwards if you want. But yeah, there's certainly some misguided projects. There's a ton of great projects out there.
Jason, this is kind of for you, but it's kind of for all of them too. After listening to all of these, I've been truly trying to understand if you're dealing with countries like, Rwanda and Uganda, you are dealing with the most vulnerable people in the world to fraud, to anything else. How do you, with these technologies, then you could be taking the entire, money for food or life away from a bunch of people if they are vulnerable to being, of every kind of crime. I mean, if people are going and spending everything they have through a person they've never seen before to get minutes that they may or may not get, I mean, how do you, there must be fixtures in this. I mean, actually this applies to the other two of you as well. I mean, how are you dealing with thieves, for lack of a better word, thieves of money in your situation, thieves of data in your information, thieves of, content, photos, whatever in your situation? I mean, it sounds like all of these are very utopian in how they're being approached, but I haven't heard anybody say anything yet about how, if you're going into a world market, you can address any of those, or especially you, because you're dealing with the most vulnerable people on earth.
Sure, yeah. I think it's an important point, and you really have to be sensitive to these issues. I mean, we're also a research team, so we're building new applications and deploying them in these regions. And, we want to make sure that the folks that we're working with are aware of the project that we're doing. And typically, we've never done a project where people had to pay to participate, for example. So that sort of thing. But I think, in terms of the money example, when I talked about the phone ladies, right? I mean, those are people that are trusted in the community, right? So people know them and those sorts of things. But you could end up with a rogue person who represents them and establishes them as a trusted person and starts skimming money. So it's definitely a concern. I don't know offhand of stories like that, but I'm sure they're out there. Right? So one of the things that helps with this type of situation is formalizing this process. Right? So what happened was these mobile phone carriers created a mobile money system, right? And so this assures that your money is delivered to the right person because of the security implicit in the GSM protocol, right? And so then you don't have these same sort of social challenges. But you also lose some of the social stuff because, this woman had a business, is receiving this money and giving it to other folks. That business either has to change or not exist anymore. So there's a lot of challenges along the way. And I completely agree with you. I think it's very context dependent. You have to be sensitive to these issues.
So is trust, is that an interface design question, or is that a technology question, or?
Social question, it's all those things. Yeah, it's a good point.
Are you asking me about intellectual property and stealing? Yeah. It's funny, in publishing right now, I mean, if you look in the news, then plagiarism just last week in publishing. It was all over the news that a particular author had borrowed from several other authors in the genre and producing a book, and the book was recalled. So yeah, it happens in publishing all the time, unfortunately. One of the great things about sharing the work publicly on a site like Figment is we know when you published it. So we can provide timestamps, and we save that information for our users. So there has been some examples even in our contest, and yeah, do people cheat? Yeah, we find them, and they get disqualified. We haven't had too many issues with plagiarism. It's a very honest community, probably because there is a check. They review each other, so you don't want to give anybody else a bad review or steal from somebody else because they'll steal from you or give you a bad review. So we haven't had too many issues of it, but we can provide time and date stamps for people.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much of a concern it is for sort of digital content in the way that sort of interacts in Gimibar. I think that basically if it's content that you found, you're just sharing copies of this content and the stuff that you created, it's backed up in the original service and in Gimibar, and then theoretically also to like your computer. I guess you're no more or less vulnerable than through any sort of virus or something like that would do it, but it's pretty thoroughly, deeply backed up actually. So I don't think that's a tremendous concern for us. It's very weird for somebody to sort of steal my bookmarks and then now they're their bookmarks. It's just sort of like, okay, cool.
But as you attempt to use the bookmarks to create more valuable information, did you run into an issue then where people capture screenshots of various websites? Are you tracking attribution of those websites so that those are protected? Or do they make the application later using that content?
I think the best that we can do in terms of the attribution stuff, I think the best we can do is make it really easy to do the right thing. And then if you would like to, for example, like I could save an image with Gimibar and then it's in there, and then screenshot it with my Mac, and now it's on my desktop, and I can title it Cameron's Awesome Photo and upload it to other places. Which one you could do, you could have just done that from the beginning and dragged it to your desktop. I think that there's no way we can stop somebody malicious from pretending that some piece of content is theirs, other than through just general social pressure to not do it. So I think our best bet is to just make it dead simple to do the right thing, so that you're not even thinking about it and you do the right thing.
Cameron, I thought that, or all of you, I thought that all your views of the future are incredibly interesting. Cameron, in specific to yours, I thought that liberating content through Guinea Bar is actually a very noble effort, though at the end where it's ultimately deposited, you mentioned is in an iCloud or a Dropbox, which essentially is another place that you don't personally own. I was wondering what you saw as the future of kind of your personal mailbox somewhere on the web as a raw feed.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know about iCloud actually, but with Dropbox, it's on my computer. I mean, it's backed up to here. There's no, I mean, there are very few other places where you can sort of put something than, I guess, your computer or some other deeper backup thing. So I think that we try to be the very accessible version of that. It's like, oh, it's in there, so that people, we try to be that API, even though we're also an app. There's just this very sort of gray area around that. But the idea is that we are an API that you could just switch out for some other one if someone came along. So we make it very easy to take that content and say, I'm not feeling this Gimme Bar thing, I'd like to try something different. And then that's now your interface to the world, to your applications. And somebody who wanted to do that could do something very simple, so they just slip that in, and all your other applications could keep working on top.
This question is mainly for Cameron with Gimme Bar and such. You're outlining kind of an idea where people not only store their content, save their content as their own, but then can also, say, re-import it, like you were talking about moving Instagram to PAP. Now, as a photographer myself, my photos on Flickr, on 500, on whatever are important to me. And so if you're able to re-import, have you thought about issues with that? Of, okay, well, now we have somebody who did some malicious stuff, and now they have my photos that they've imported at a prior date than mine, so they look better than mine do.
They imported them at a prior date?
Right, if you're able to move your content from one service to another, there's got to be some sort of understanding of when that was created in your API.
Yeah, so the timestamp of any content that we import just comes with it. You can't, I don't think that you can change that.
There'd be no way to modify this in your internal.
Yeah, it's not like, for example, the source URL and the timestamp and the geotag, those don't change. You can't adjust those. You can change the title of what it's called, and you can give metadata around it, like tags and descriptions, but not like what it is.
Okay.
Nicole, you had held back some of the details on the immersive fiction. Are there any, I guess, products like that out in the market now? What's comparable to it?
Actually, in doing this, I actually multitasked since I'm a master's student and did my thesis on some augmented reality apps and some digital storytelling. So there are some really interesting companies in this space, and this speaks to what you were asking about nonfiction. There's a company in Boulder, Colorado called Tag What, and I think they're in Boulder, they might be in Denver, so don't take that. I don't know them personally, but I did some research on them. They're doing a nonfiction kind of AR where they believe the world is full of stories. And it might just be even the story of where your butcher grew up, when you go to visit your butcher, and if he wants to share that with you, that you can upload that into an app. But it also helps in terms of, parks and things like that. So yeah, we've done a lot of research on it.
As a system administrator for web communities, I've been having to deal with stolen content in the fiction specifically. So have you dealt with, and are you prepared to deal with, you are in some places the original publisher of these people's content, some of which are minors, and you are in some ways de facto proof that this is theirs. So you're already, your system is already, you're ready for these, because it's going to happen.
Oh, it already has. Yeah, it has already happened. And, you know, minors 13 and over, we're COPA compliant, so we don't have anybody under the age of 13. But we do have, we have had some cases where some intellectual property was recorded stolen, but we can prove it. So we've been able to do that for people and provide them with that data.
Yeah, let's wrap this up and have each of the panelists give just a thumbnail on what's the real takeaway in terms of the future of social media. We'll start with Cameron. What's the one big...
I don't know, man. You should just own your content. Your work and your time is valuable, and if you put it into building a collection of content or creating content, that should be yours. It shouldn't be owned by an application that enables you to do it, because generally the tech there isn't that difficult to help you do it.
I would say it's niche communities, and that it's going to be utility. You can't just offer social networking, you have to offer utility.
I think for me, it's just, it's about inclusion, right? Worldwide, people in developing nations need to be party to the social media landscape just as much as anyone else. And there may be different modalities that they want to interact in, but that should be allowed and they should be empowered to.
So it's inclusive, niche, controlled content.
Well said.
I couldn't have summed that up better. I hope everyone will stick around. We've got some snacks and some drinks for everyone. And if there are any more questions, let's thank our panelists. Thank you.